Hi, I'm Chris, horror filmmaker and fanatic, here to explain how scary things are. The thing that I'm talking about today is a strange thing, and it keeps getting stranger, because it is Stranger Things, Season 3, released in 2019. I had fun with that one. In the summer after Season 2, things are heating up, literally. School's out, there's a brand new mall in town, and the Hawkins crew begin the hormone-riddled confusion of teenagehood. While romance blossoms and complicates their friendships, danger looms with the Mind Flayer showing signs of returning. The usual cast return to face the threat once again, with new allies joining the mix, while threats of old and new threaten the entire safety of Hawkins. Rotten Tomatoes score of 89%, audience score of 86%. Each season's been going ding 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 a little bit down, and of course it's a Netflix show, so we don't know any box office or budget numbers, but it's Stranger Things, so it was huge. Today I'm going to break down in 4 key categories how scary Season 3 is, especially compared to Seasons 2 and 1. So if you don't want spoilers for this season and Seasons 1 and 2, then I would highly suggest skipping to this time code where you can go to the overview and you can see the overall categories, and I won't spoil anything for you. It's nice, it's easy, just skip to that little chapter marker. But if you don't care about spoilers and you want to hear me talk even more, then keep on watching to find out how scary is Stranger Things Season 3. First category, the thrills, the intense, heart-pounding moments that are fun in any kind of horror media. Just like Season 2, we got a wide range going on here. It takes a little bit for things to get going, but I will say, especially compared to Season 2, I think Season 3 has more conflict and energy propelling it through, but still not as much as Season 1 had. Season 1 hooked you right away with Will's disappearance. There's too much focus on the romantic subplots and comedy, and a lot of the storylines are just not horror at all. There's really nothing spooky or scary going on. You have Billy's entire storyline, which is legitimately horror. Like, that is the first, I would say, horror storyline of Stranger Things, but he's a bad guy, and it's just 1 out of 7 different storylines, so that's not really enough to keep the horror thrills going. But as we keep going through the season, the thrills do start ramping up. The sauna test, that whole sauna room scene with Eleven versus Billy, that's a great scene. That was actually thrilling and intense. One of the few moments of the show where I was like, whoa, this is actually getting really lit, whoa. And then shortly after that, you have the entire hospital chase scene with the 2 guys that are possessed, and they're attacking Jonathan and Nancy, and Jonathan's just getting his poor butt beat up all the time. It's so sad, but you know, they keep getting up and fighting, and then they defeat him, but then it transforms into a gooey monster and chases him down. It's like, oh snap. And just, yeah, anytime Eleven gets to use her powers against the creature, that's always really thrilling. Each season definitely builds up how many times she's using her powers and how much energy she has to push to really fight against the forces, and this season ramps it up even higher. And then the entire finale is legitimately epic. The final episode is called The Battle of Starcourt, and they really pay off that title because, my goodness, the entire battle with the squid monster, that entire battle in Starcourt is very thrilling, and when they're throwing the fireworks and stuff, there's some beautiful shots in there, and it really does just feel epic. I would say the show had moments of epicness in Season 1, but never really reached there, and then Season 2, 11 shutting the gate was legitimately, like, epic, like, whoa, okay, this feels like a grander show. Season 3 upped that scale as well. I think if the story didn't take so long to get going, then the thrills would have been more consistent up to here, just like Season 1, but it doesn't, so it's sort of a blend of 1 and 2, where it's just kind of a whole gradient there. Next category, grossness, the disgusting, ew, gooey stuff that your mom doesn't want to look at. Season 3 actually steps it up in the grossness department. There's a range, of course. It's not like every episode has something gross, so it's just a solid number. You know, there are still plenty of times where nothing gross is happening, but everything with the flayed, whenever they're showing up and doing something, whenever they're melting or eating gross food or whatever, the rats exploding, all that, pretty gross. There's some little gooey stuff, and you know, the whole season builds up to the big gooey monster being formed, so just anything to do with that is kind of just gross in itself, and that's pretty well handled. And then the grossest scene of the show so far, I would say Season 1 had the best with pulling the tube out of Will's mouth. That one was good, but this season beats it. Eleven's leg surgery scene where she has a part of the Mind Flayer's creature in her leg and they have to cut it open and then draw it out. They really did a great job of that scene. That scene felt straight out of like an actual gross horror movie. And I think what really elevates that scene beyond just being gross is that it's happening to a character we care about, and they just have to get through it. They just have to get it out there, and they really focus in on, like, I think it was Jonathan, his its hand is like digging into her leg and all that. It's mostly CGI, so that kind of takes away from the grossness. I think if it was completely done practically, there would have been a lot more blood and actually would have been really gross. But that scene, very well handled. That definitely elevated the grossness all the way up to there. That was well done. Next up, shock value. The surprising, disturbing content you didn't expect Stranger Things to show you. Compared to seasons 1 and 2, season 3, in my opinion, has the lowest in the shock value department. It has the gradient. It goes from nothing to a little bit, but it's kind of low overall. When I think back on the key moments that surprised me in seasons 1 and 2, season 3 just doesn't stack up. This will really be brought up in the atmosphere category, but for the most part, a lot of these storylines are not very horror-based, and there's this sort of silly, goofy tone throughout season 3 where I just don't really believe the characters are in all that much danger. So whenever threats are arising, nothing really pays off from it. And I think that's a really important part of the shock value category with horror especially, because you can have a creepy, spooky atmosphere. You can have constant jump scares everywhere, but if you don't show the audience something that they're not expecting, that they haven't seen before, then we're not actually going to be that afraid. What we're afraid of is seeing something that we haven't seen before. But if everything we're seeing is just kids getting away and they're all running around and doing silly things and ooh, spy Russians, and all right, it's just not much shock value in here. For the shock value points that I will give, everything involved with Billy's really well handled because I can see the inner turmoil in his character. So when he's doing these messed up things, I feel bad for him. And so that in turn makes it more shocking. If I just expect him to do horrible things because he's a horrible person like he was in season 2, then it's not going to be as shocking to me. But I can feel that turmoil, and the way they handle, especially like the scene where they knock out the lifeguard's parents, that whole scene is pretty dark and pretty well handled. And the way he's just kidnapping people and just being pretty dark and hardcore. And again, I love the scene, the whole sauna room scene where he breaks through and he's, you know, swinging the glass. And I think it's the first time the show ever dropped the F-bomb. That was definitely kind of shocking a bit. Like, ooh, okay, we're getting somewhere. And then Steve getting beat up and kind of being tortured by the Russians. They actually really beat him up a good amount. It's like, ah, man, that kind of sucks. You know, if you expect the kids to get kidnapped, so like, okay, but then Steve just gets a crap beat out of him again. Every season seems to happen. I guess the actor likes to have all that makeup on him. I don't know. Now this one, I don't know how to include this, but this really annoys me, and it's definitely my least favorite thing the show has ever done. And I brought it up in season 2. The entire plot line of Karen Wheeler falling for Billy. That's all throughout episode 1. Their whole relationship building up to the affair, and I hate it because Karen is meant to be a positive character that we like, and she definitely does really great things. You know, she shows that she's a really good mom. There's a really sweet scene with her and Nancy in the middle of the season, but for her to be falling for, I'm pretty sure, an underage guy, or at least a high schooler, whatever, while she's married and has kids, it's just so messy and so weird, and the show plays it off more comically. It's legitimately shocking to me that that ended up in the show and people don't seem to be talking about it. I mean, if you definitely switch the genders and it was an older man hitting on an underage girl, that would not be in the show, would it? But instead we have this. So yeah, thank God it didn't actually happen, and Karen, you know, came to her senses and didn't do it. So you know, but if they actually did, oh my gosh, shock value would have been through the roof, but they didn't. So yeah, shock value, pretty tight. Final category, the most important one, atmosphere, the overall tone and feeling. How spooky and eerie is it building up the scares? Stranger Things season 3 is the lowest for atmosphere yet. It definitely feels like this season took a step back and didn't want to really focus on horror all that much, while the entire plot line of the Mind Flayer and creating the Flayed is genuinely scary, and seeing them melt down and form this creature, that's really cool. There's not a whole lot of time dedicated to that, and there's way more time dedicated to storylines that are more comedic or romantic or just kind of silly and goofy. Same problem with season 2. The show just kind of feels a little too full of itself and just lets its characters run wild and say funny lines, and that takes away from the tension and fear that the Flayed should be bringing up. And what also adds to that is these characters are constantly getting away from the danger, so every time there's a huge threat and then the kids defeat it somehow and everything's fine and normal, then I'm gonna be less scared the next time the threat comes around. Pretty much all the scenes that I've mentioned already are the horror scenes of the show. I guess the old lady going crazy and all that, that was definitely a horror-y. That's probably the best way I can describe season 3, is that it is not a horror show, but then every now and then we'll have a horror moment. Season 1 had an overall tone that kept it kind of uneasy throughout in this mystery building, and then season 2 started off with not a lot, but then reached it. Season 3 never really reached too many highs of like, oh my god, this is scary, and these poor kids. You know, when you have the giant monster in the mall and there's this huge battle and they're somehow fighting it with fireworks, it just kind of suspends my suspension of disbelief a bit, and it's like, I just can't quite take it that seriously. And so that fear that I should be feeling from, you know, this great CGI scary monster, I'm just not feeling it because it's colorful fireworks are defeating it. Okay. Moving on to the overview without spoilers, of course. Everything kind of changed from season 2. You have Grossness finally getting to play around with the big boys a bit. Things actually get a little gross in this season, but there's still a whole little spectrum, so it's not like every episode's gonna be gross. But shock value is dipping down. We got some low shock value. You're not gonna really see a whole lot this season that'll surprise you, unfortunately. Atmosphere is the lowest it's been yet. I think the horror atmosphere is very absent throughout the season, and it's really just pockets of horror sprinkled throughout. The overall tone of the show is not going for spooky at all. And then the thrills reached a new high. It definitely gets very thrilling by the end, very exciting, but it still takes a little bit to get going, similar with season 2. My recommendations for season 3, if you liked seasons 1 and 2, then definitely watch season 3. If you were kind of iffy on the show and maybe you didn't like season 2, then you might not quite like season 3 as well. If you're looking for things to get scarier, season 3 does not. It has interesting, scary ideas, but the tone of the show and the focus on the horror is just a lot lower than it used to be. So season 3 is just not really that scary. I would say season 3 is my least favorite season so far. I think every season is good, but I prefer season 1 the most. I think that was the most consistent season so far, and season 2 had some pacing issues and being a little too full of itself with its characters and just letting things happen without real conflict or drama. And then season 3 has those similar problems, but also gets just too goofy and silly at times and comedic. But it's still fun, it's still entertaining, and there is still some nice payoffs at the end. So, you know, even if you feel like, all right, this is kind of taking a while to get going, the payoff is pretty much worth it. And there you have it. That is how scary season 3 of Stranger Things is. Yes, I will be doing season 4 in the coming days after the final 2 episodes come out, so don't worry about that. I gotcha. And then I might also do a whole bonus video just going through my in-depth review of season 4 and comparing it to the first 3 seasons. Comment below anything else you would like me to rank and tell you how scary it is, and subscribe for more videos. See you in the next one.